Babylon, straight to Mount Zion and the Star Liner. It stops in Nigeria, Gambia, Ghana, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Senegal, Guinea, Uganda, Chad, Togo. Hey, final destination Ethiopia. Much applauding, do it according. Better respect to the honorable Marcus Garvey. Much applauding, do it according. Better respect to the honorable Marcus Garvey. Repatriation. George Benjamin. Bless the line of airline. Bless the line of airline. Bless the line of airline. Bless the line of ship of CNC time. Bless the line of airline. Bless the line of airline. Bless the line of airline. Bless the line ship in the CNC. Listen up, take notice. Sizzler promote it. Anything from black people, I come support it. Black airline, yeah, black people are wrote it. 30,000 feet above sea level, them are float it. I don't feel like me, I'm some picture black air roses. All of the islands on a first class, them are spout it. None can deny that, well, don't think, don't try that. We don't fear nobody.
I would say good morning, everybody, but it's evening where most of you are. It just got to be, well, the sun's been up for a little bit less than an hour where I am now. So I was giving some of y'all some time to come in, and I'm not going to front. That very first track that you all heard was different from what I remembered. The version I heard was Black Africa awaits, awaits, awaits. All black daughters and son run come. The white man's not going to rule over this throne. Apparently the version I clicked on was the wrong one. Rastafari, the last king of Ethiopia, is not my God. He's not my king. He never claimed to be God. He and I would not have argued about this. So I wasn't trying to promote shirk. I just missed it. Thought I was clicking on another version and I can't find it. I can remember it. Anyway, first off, I want to say that if there's wind noise, I'm sorry about that. I'm gonna do what I can to block it because it's not very windy today. It's too early, and but there may be some because I'm recording this outside. My wife is fast asleep, and I'm one of the loudest people in the country in which I live, let alone in this this town I'm in. I'm gonna start off not with the peace greeting because this may be somewhat hostile, but I am going to start off with a shout out to Cortez Smith, the Reverend Brother Pastor Deacon Dr. Edward Anderson, Don Calypso, the Roger Report, Bot Ladola, Jaws 2003, Select the Jaw, J Cash, J Talk, J Born Center. I know that's a lot of J's, right? And there's some others that didn't come to mind right now, but I also want to shout out to MOT and BGS, even if they don't agree with each other. Sorry, there's this damn fly that can't seem to learn to stay away. Apparently he doesn't understand that I had a lot of black militancy in my coffee this morning, and I'm not going to be patient with no insects getting in my face. So you may hear the phone or you may hear the speaker move, because I'm not above using the speaker to kill a fly. I hate flies. And if it wasn't forbidden, I would trap them alive and then burn them, just because I hate them that much. But that is a forbidden thing to do for us. So anyway, to get straight to it, the whole reason that I picked the monikers that I picked, Black Heart and Black Mind, do have a reason. I mean, well, the reasons there are deep, I should say, but there is a substance behind them. I first picked it because when I started my channel, I think I started back in 2015 to 2016, but it didn't have subscribers. I started it pretty much to confront the anti-blackness and the pro-white sentiments of non-black Muslims and even Muslims that are black. And I make no apologies for that. I may do a debate one day on here if some people want to say to me, well, you know, Islam's not the solution and it's another slave trader religion. I may allow an open panel one day for that kind of debate, but I'm not sure. Still thinking. I do unabashedly say to us that Islam is the solution for our people, but I don't expect everybody to just take my word for it. I've always said you do the research, you find out Um, and I've told some people where to start, and others could tell you too. Abdullah bin Babi and Abdullah al-Amariki can tell you. Bilal Abdullah can also tell you. There's another YouTuber named Hakeem Muhammad. They can cover this. This is not something. This what I have told us is a solution is not something that the Arab or the Indian or the Pakistani or anybody else with colorism issues that probably predate actual European Caucasians contact with them can come along and use to um, enslave you and move you from the back of the bus to the back of the camel. That part is not true. And that's the whole point about this. This is something that should make you more militant against white supremacy. And this is one thing that automatically makes many of us black folks who become Muslim better than people who were born Muslim or born to Muslim parents and have never realized this. This is the ultimate revelation of the ultimate revolution. This is where revelation and revolution are combined, but it takes a deep study to understand it. So many of us don't know this. I get that. We hear that Brother Malcolm went over to the East and that he just wasn't allowed to see how they really treat us. Well, he probably wasn't. I mean, he didn't live there, he visited. But the word got out that, word got out, and the words and the rumors that got out were oftentimes far worse than the reality. Do they want to be darker here? No, they don't. Would they marry a white woman at the drop of a hat, even over their own bronze Arab women or Pakistani or Indian women? Absolutely, they would do so. And that's why I draw the line and say this is no longer a personal preference. It's a cultural preference. You're brainwashed and you have self-hatred issues. End of story. That's why I will say that an African-American man can have either preference, and I'm not going to get on him. Whereas one of these men, I'm going to get on every time they prefer that white woman over even their own. Because you see, one is a personal preference. We already know African-American men actually do have personal preferences. They vary from person to person, even from year to year within the same person. I myself was not interested in lighter skinned women. And then my first wife from the continent was a lighter skinned woman. We got along great. She looked after me very well. And her first language and mine were not first languages to each other. I mean, they weren't first languages in common. I had to think before I could speak in her language. And she had to think before she could speak properly in her language to where I would understand it, because I don't speak slang in their language. But I could honestly say that when it came down to this, walaikum salam formula, when it came down to this, I promoted it as a solution for black people. I did that on another channel long ago, and it wasn't even my own channel, but that's another story for another time. But I started with that. You see, when I would meet these Arabs at times, and I didn't hide my race from them, they would say, well, but mashallah, your heart is white. And I would tell them, I know you mean that as a compliment, but in my culture, a white heart is not a compliment. Well, why not? Well, because to us, it means that you sell us out to white people. It means that you side with white folks against black folks. Oh, racism is, and see, then they start talking about how bad racism is. Well, I know that, but that doesn't mean you don't subscribe to some of its tenets. I mean, you want to see not just you, but your people become lighter over time, which is just the Arabic language version of blanqueamiento, which pretty much means bleaching. So, no, get out of my face with that mess. And they would try to use religion to justify their views on race and color. And I'd have to tell them, you can't pull that off on me. It's not something you can do. One day somebody said, are you one of those that believes that Adam was black, meaning the father of humanity? And I told him, I'm one of those that knows he's black according to your own language, because his name, Adam, means very dark. And the noun for that would be idma, darkness. I mean, didn't they describe Bilal as severe in darkness? May Allah be pleased with him. Didn't they say that? As a matter of fact, didn't they describe Ali as the same thing? But y'all translate the same description in Arabic into different ones in English so that we don't know. Because you can't believe that God actually honored black people the way he honored anybody else. I started off with that. I started off with the name Black Heart just to offend these little white Arab sensibilities, and I don't apologize for that. Now today, I realize that I might have to do the same thing with my own people. Because you see, the heart, I went from black heart to black mind. Now, what's the reason for that? Real simple, the right wing and the left wing. And once again, my people have been caught up in these white folks' debates between the right and the left wing. Now, if they're debating about us, that's great and grand. It's the least of reason to pay attention. But let's also be honest about something else. We're caught up in these debates that we don't need. The right wing and the left wing. It's like what Malcolm said. See, Malcolm didn't trust the Republicans or the Democrats. He said you got a choice between a fox and a wolf. These are your options. That's what he said. But then, to make matters worse, fast forward to today, and none of us would say that Malcolm's not a hero. We would all agree, no, he was a hero. He didn't have to be perfect, no man is. But he certainly meant well. He was sincere. And one of the ways we know he was sincere, he died with no savings because he couldn't make money. He just couldn't. And when he left the NOI, knowing that that was also his income, he still left, knowing his income was going to dry off. I would apologize for that belch, but that was actually kind of a good one. I don't know if the mic picked it up, but it had kind of a motorcycle rumble to it. So anyway, Malcolm understood this, and he still made the steps that he made, took the steps he took. And it was his sister, Ella Collins, that funded that Hodge. So for those that want to say, well, black mind or black heart, he hates black women, y'all can fuck the shuck up. That ain't the case. I actually know the good that black women can be and can do because I've seen them do it before. It's in the history books. I want them to do that and focus on that and stop being deluded. But today I got to tell black men the same thing. Why, brothers, do you have this mindset? Why do you have this mindset, brothers, that it's the right wing or left wing? What is up with that? You see, I'm hearing a lot of people say Trump was the best thing that ever happened to us. Conveniently forgetting the things that Trump has said and done and refused to apologize for. Trump believes that shady business practices are completely okay and legitimate. He has no issue with them. Trump doesn't even think that they're shady, to be honest, as long as they're legal. Now, granted, that might mean he's not going to jail, but we forget about a lot of things. One of the things we've forgotten is that Trump actually had his golf resort built and didn't pay the builder. I think he paid a little bit, but then he stopped making payments. He would rather pay a legal team to tie the issue up in court just so that the builders would never finish getting their money through the court system. He would rather do that than to pay them. That's not all. Trump's granddad started this off because Trump's granddad did things like rent out places that he didn't own. He had to go from town to town to town. And eventually he wound up in Canada. Then he went back to Germany and he was naturalized as a U.S. citizen at that point. He couldn't stay in Germany and they deported him back to the country of his citizenship, which was the U.S. But they deported him back to the port of New York. And so his granddad wound up deported from his birth homeland, Germany, to his adopted naturalized homeland, which was the U.S. And fortunately, because he had done his shady business stuff in the northwestern United States, he didn't have to face anybody that he had scammed or cheated. And that's why he has what he has. That's the reason for that. And so that being said, you don't have to be on Biden's team because of things that Biden has said about black folks. You certainly don't have to get behind Kamala Harris. But black folks, again, because of what we don't have for ourselves, we're making two mistakes. One, we're assuming every other race has these things for themselves. They're things that we can learn from them, but other races also are under the thumb of white supremacy. Secondly, we're arguing about which way to go, as if there is a right way. Look, if I was in charge and I didn't like black people, do you think I would give you a right way to go? I mean, look, if I'm going to chase you through the woods, some woods that I know, and I'm going to chase you down a path, and then that path has a fork in the road, do you think it's going to matter which one of those two roads you take? If I'm chasing you through the woods and I know these woods and I got all these weapons, it doesn't matter which one you go down. I've got traps waiting on both of them. Just a question of which trap. It's really more of me telling you to pick your poison than me giving you a right or wrong way to get out of this. I wouldn't do that. If I hate you and I'm finally chasing you through some woods, or if I just want to keep you as a captive and I'm chasing you through some woods, I'm not going to chase you down a path through the forest that's going to fork, and one of them is a way for you to escape. You're going to have to break the rules, step off the path, go into the thicket, hide, and fashion some weapons to fight back. And of course, I'm not going to approve of that and say that that's an okay thing to do. Y'all still ain't got it yet. So I chose the term black heart first, and later the term black mind, because that's the heart and the mind. That is the middle of the road. These wings are just wings that belong to the same bird. And in whatever case, that bird is a pro-white bird. That's what that is. That bird will use its left wing to trick you, deceive you, lull you to sleep, or to use the right wing to slap you. It doesn't really make a difference. It's one damn bird. And we're arguing over which wing, forgetting the heart and mind of the bird, because we do not have black hearts and black minds. So I chose the monikers. And I'm getting sick and tired of hearing some of you country ass niggas arguing on behalf of two different slave masters. It's okay that you got a problem with Daniel Cameron and what he did and the cover up that's being exposed by Professor Black Truth. And I haven't listened to all of it yet, but it's okay you got an issue with David Cameron. I mean, could Breonna Taylor have chosen more wisely in men? Yeah, I'm sure she could have. We've all said this about sisters in general. Does this mean that she did something to earn those bullets that killed him? Absolutely not. Not at all. Yet she still got them because of a man already in custody. Yes, they lied on reports and everything else. And Daniel Cameron pretty much let these guys off, except for the one that's being charged for the bullet that missed. But understand this, if you're going to get on Daniel Cameron, especially about his white wife and his associations with Mitch McConnell, fair enough. You can't sit up here and get on him and then turn around and let Kamala Harris off the hook. And I've said this before. One of the reasons I'm so militant and I seem to be so one-sided is because I've maintained, and now today's, it's still yesterday for many of you. So yesterday my time, today my time, you never mind. The point I'm making is that Steph Klingscales put out a video about why her standards are so high. And he pretty much said they have options. The standards that they have and the unrealism of the standards is proof that they've got so many options. The average lady's got a bunch of options and has been this way for a long time. And the average man does not know what it's like to be spoiled for choice or even to have a bunch of options. He said it. You know, if you're a man and you don't self-improve and work on yourself, you are toast. You are guaranteed stuck to be by yourself. And that was one of the truths. I mean, that's what I've been saying for the longest. So Kamala Harris had choices. She had options. And that same crowd talking about black men are so colorist are sitting up and telling us that she had a bunch of options. So how are they going to justify her getting not a Latino, not an Indian that was, you know, conscious? Because there are some people in India that are conscious as well, believe it or not. But they're always stuck in India. Not some other person of color that's not an enemy to black people. No. Straight up white man. We got every right to ask that question. I mean, Daniel Cameron, he's in Kentucky. He may not have really had many options. That's a possibility, especially if he was the type that had his stuff together when he was younger. But we look at Kamala Harris like, well, you know, because of black men and because they say that there aren't any good black men out there, we can sit up and give her a pass for being with not just a non-black man, but the white man. And some would sit up and say, well, you know, black man, you've already said that your phenotype amongst black people gets passed over. So maybe you're just mad that a white guy's got a better shot than you. Well, that's not it, but that should be. I actually should be pissed about that. But for whatever reason, I'm more pissed about the hypocrisy than anything else. Because I came up pro-black, that means I want what's good for the black team, only to see that the same sisters that were telling black men that they needed to be more pro-black themselves were only pro-negativity, one way or another, either swirling as his bedwench uh, or sexually rewarding the most negatively stereotypical behavior that whites ever attributed to black men, and having only their babies and reproducing with only them. I don't mean only as in 100% of every single time in black America, but I mean almost exclusively. The issue I'm getting at is that we're taking these extreme positions when it comes to politics. Yet and still, Malcolm already told us that's not it. You got to do for self. He said this a while back. And now I'm sitting up here, having lived abroad for many years, telling black folks, yes, if you have to live under somebody else, it's better to live under someone that does not hate you for your blackness. It's better to do that than it is to live under a system in which you have citizenship on paper and you still don't have the rights of citizenship. I mean, at least here, it's understood. In this country, well, actually in most of the Gulf, if your mother's from the Gulf and your dad's from somewhere else, you're not a Gulf citizen. They tell you outright. You know what it is. So let's say your mother's Emirati, but your father is, let's say that your father's from Europe. Okay. Guess what that means? You ain't no citizenship. You inherited from your father. So now you're not a citizen. That's it. You're just not a citizen. But that's on paper. It's there for everybody to know. There is no, you're a citizen, but we're going to treat you differently. Now, there's known to be some job discrimination in some parts of the Gulf, where even citizens whose grandparents came from somewhere else and they were naturalized, but went back when these countries still did that. Sometimes there's job discrimination. They're not trusted. I met a man who he was actually from the Hijaz region of Saudi Arabia, and his wife was an American Canadian teaching here in this country. And so he was living here actually with her. Now, he could live here because he is a Gulf citizen, but his grandparents came from Algeria. And the funny thing was, in Medina, he said there just aren't many jobs. But where we were, there were more jobs. However, he wasn't trusted because he's not of Bedouin origins. His grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents went roaming the desert, drinking camel milk and eating dates and fighting each other over livestock and water wells. So he's not trusted now because they know, the Bedouins know their culture is fucking inferior. Yeah, I said it. I had to deal with that yesterday. And they know that their attitude towards education is jacked up. They're aware of this. They're lazy as hell. Their hospitality is excellent. These are a very friendly set of people. They're not hostile. They are nowhere near the terrorist stereotype that white folks have about them. And they always want me to go back to America and tell white America that they're not terrorists. And I say to them, why the hell would I do that? I mean, they could come here and see this. I mean, hell, they're going, they're going a few airports away in Dubai all the time. Oh, they love to go there. They just don't want to go elsewhere because they feel like they don't have to obey other people's laws. And when they can't buy liquor and consume it and drink it out in the street and have crazy parties, they're not going to go somewhere like that. Usually when they do go to other places, it's for a job and they still think somehow they're exempt. They don't have to follow the rules. That's what you're dealing with. And you want me to focus on going back to tell them that you're not a terrorist? Why do you care what they think? We have debates about this. And I don't respect their opinions. Because, well, their opinions are pretty much, walaikum salam, Bronx Don. Their opinions are pretty much pro-white and anti-black. Not that, I mean, they don't hate black people. They would never resort to the hatred that you are experiencing now in America. I mean, if you sit up and tell someone condemn whites, condemn racism, they'll condemn racism. It's just that they like to condemn it in a blanket way, as if there's some kind of reverse racism that we have against whites. That's where the issue comes in. So what I'm saying is, yeah, they're brainwashed, but they're nowhere near as bad and as dangerous as the white Americans under which you're living right now. And so I'm telling you this after all these years of living here. I've been saying not only is Islam the solution, but migration is too, repatriation. For some of us, it is back home. For some of us, I'm meaning the continent. And that's a big continent. So that's 54 countries. Some countries are great for some of us that are not great for others of us. And that's fine. That's okay. The point I'm making is that you got an entire continent. Now, if you function much better in lesser developed areas because you like to start ahead of the game, there are areas like that for you. If you function much better in bigger developed areas because of the organizational infrastructure already in place, and that's how you go from the bottom and move up, then there's that for you. It depends on where you go. 54 countries, 55, I'm sorry. So there's that. I've been saying this. And yet I hear these debates in Black America. I'm not concerned about the debate between Biden and Trump. I heard it was funny. I heard it was a fiasco, but a lot of you were frustrated. Well, who are we going to vote for now? Dummy, that was never the solution. By the time they allowed us to vote, they'd already made sure it was not going to be a solution. And that's what many of us keep missing. After all this time, not just in America, but in the Americas, but especially in the States and the UK and Canada. After all this time, we still haven't figured it out. If you are not on the bottom, they're going to hurt you. If you don't even stay at the bottom willingly, they're going to hurt you. And if voting was the solution, they would already be killing us for talking about it. That's never one of the things they complain about. They complain because we don't salute the flag. They complain because we date their women or because we won't date their women. They complain about certain attitudes and the ways that we think of them. But what they don't complain about is how we vote. And I've said before, when you're being opposed by someone, one of the first things you got to understand is that your solution cannot be something they approve of, unless they're no longer your enemy. Well, they never stop being the enemy. I've said this before when it comes to Black men, mentoring in Black communities for these single moms and their kids. You can do that, but you got to do it in a way that mom's not going to approve of. You're going to have to tell those little kids certain things about their mother's past choices. You don't have to be a detractor for their mother. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But you're going to have to say something about their mom's past choices. That has to be called into question. How come my daddy ain't here? Well, because if your dad was the type to be here, she wouldn't have laid down with him. And truth be told, he probably still wants to be here, but she drove him away. There's a high chance of that. A high chance. I'm one of the lucky guys because when I had my son out of wedlock, his mother did not badmouth me to him. And now he and I get along great. I never got to live with him like I wanted, but we still get along great. And I've opened my door so that even as an adult, he can live with me. And he actually wants to leave the U.S. So he's looking into skill sets that will open the door for him to leave and be able to live abroad. But I'm one of the lucky ones. A lot of other men I know, they love to see their kids, but they can't. They would love to do so. Childhood friend of mine back in 2016 had not seen his kids in 3 years. Now, if he had seen his kids since then, he would have put up a post on social media saying so. I finally got to see them. He would have done all of that. He didn't because he hasn't been able to see them. Somehow his ex-wife has been able to tie this up in court every single time, which probably means that she's using what she gets from him in child support to tie it up in court so he can't see them. And one of the things I thought about doing at one time was kind of positioning myself to be in her view as a willing simp to take on somebody's kids, and then and then spending time with them, and then going to see my man's with the kids so he could see his babies. Oh, we going to my friend's house. He's got a good place set up for them. Oh, really? Okay. Well, I'll meet him one day. Yeah, sure, you will, if you haven't already. And then one day they meet. Oh, yeah, this is my man's. Introduce him with a nickname, and it's the father of her babies. Put that smirk on his face and mine. I considered that, but I I was married, and I don't do that to I just don't believe in adultery like that. So, and I was happily married too. I was married to the lady in North Africa, and I was like, nah, I can't pull that off. But I was trying to think of ways to get around her consent so he could see his boys, because there was no real order against it except the temporary one until it could be resolved in court. But she kept tying that up somehow. So what I'm getting at is that you have options. The continent may not be the one place and for some of us, it's going to be two places. Some of us would do best in the continent and then in other parts of the globe. But we got to stop staying with America, because we think, well, America's the greatest thing that ever happened. I'm hearing more black men say ignorant, right-wing Republican shit like this because they're conservatives. They think they got to be conservatives. And because we have conservative values, generally speaking, as a people, they think they now got to be Republicans and support people like Trump and those who support him. Like that's the way to win. I'm telling you, it's not. If the population of America had been more politically literate and even just linguistically literate, they would not have voted for Trump. They didn't vote for him even though he was a misogynist racist who likes to grab vaginas. No, they voted for him because he was a misogynist racist that liked to grab vaginas. Because I wouldn't even say his hatred, just his willingness to scapegoat non-whites in general and disrespect them and do things to them that they never tolerate being done to them, was the reason that he was voted for. There were studies that were done on this. And so I'm hearing more and more black men nowadays walk into that doggone trap. Okay, fair enough. So you're sick of nigger culture, idness culture. I'm with you on that. Great. You're tired of it. Okay, you know what? Yeah, you're sick of the mating standards of the boom shikas and the bonquishas and even the sapphires that grew up in the suburbs. You're sick and tired of it. Okay, I'm with you on that. It is problematic. It is suicidal. I agree. Oh, but now you think that means that you're supposed to jump on board the same political party, spouting the same rhetoric of the people that hate you. And even if they say it's not about color, it's about culture, they're lying. And it is about color. Because you see, all of this, well, they don't like our 4C hair and our big lips that you hear sister saying. That's a projection. But what is it a projection of? I mean, sometimes it's true for certain people, but when they're saying it's like this is this major thing, a major overarching trend, they're getting it from someone else. As we've already said, sisters view black men in general through the eyes of white supremacy. That's why you got to fit the most negative stereotypes white folks have of you to qualify to get them walls. In other words, to have your own children biologically. But we judge each other the way that sisters judge us. So now we have a self-view that is immediately traceable back to white supremacy. Now, our colorism is not like the colorism of the Indian or the colorism of the Arab. I'm not sure about the Arabs actually, but it's the colorism of the Indian and the Persian and the Afghan. Their colorism predates contact with European Caucasians. They've had it since, so Europeans walked into those regions already on top. That's what wound up being the case. But our colorism came from someone else. So if this is where these views came from, then why are we spouting the same political rhetoric and believing them when they say it's not about color, it's about culture? You think all of them are telling the truth when they say that? No, these are people that actually do have a problem with your lips and your nose and your hair texture. They actually do have issues with that. Even if they don't think it's ugly. They're surrounded by others of their own kind who do. Frances Cress Welsing said it herself. They are under societal pressure to be racist when nobody else is in the room. When nobody non-white is in the room, they start talking and everybody's expected to agree with this. Only recently did it become fashionable for whites to take up for non-whites when there were no non-whites in the room and try to ostracize racists. Only recently was that fashionable. She said this back in the 90s. I remember that. You're not in the room. There's nobody non-white in the room. They're talking about everybody. An Indian walks in the room, they're talking about darker people. An African walks in the room, they're talking about African Americans. An African American walks in the room, they want to tell him what Africans hate you and they look down on you. That's exactly what I would do. How's it going, in nameless protagonist? So yeah, man, I'm here to straight up say it. We're not walking down the middle, and that's going to be the downfall of us. And we've been doing that for the longest. We haven't walked down the middle. We have a hard time going down the middle of anything, even though we can understand the middle road. When we stop and think, it's easy to figure out what's the proper attitude for us to have, even towards different phenotypes within our race. Well, the proper attitude is you can prefer what you want when it comes to mating and dating and marrying, but preferably marrying. But it doesn't replace character. That's the proper attitude to have. Okay, we look different ways. We should. But the character is what we really got to make a judgment, a personal assessment of somebody based on. Okay, all right. So now we got that part when we stop and think about it. But then we start talking and getting into these discussions, and we want to make these sweeping generalizations that don't sound anything like the middle road. So before you know it, a joke that somebody put on YouTube, light skins versus dark skins 5 years ago, police interactions, light skins versus dark skins breaking up, light skins versus dark skins, white people interactions, light skins versus dark skins fighting words. That was all deaf that put that out. These were jokes 5 years ago. Now these are actually serious arguments because we have a problem with going down the middle road. When the rubber hits the road, we got to go all far right or left. Can't go down the middle. Got to go off in everybody else's lane. So when I took that name, Black Heart, it wasn't just because I was offending Arab sensibilities. It is also because that heart is the center. That's where you can easily see how far the road goes in either direction. And when I changed it to Black Mind, it was the same thing. Now that's where you start thinking about what is actually good for Black folks. You go from feeling now to thinking. You never lose your feeling, but now you got to start thinking. And what I'm saying is that our hearts aren't even in our chest. Our hearts are in other people's wings. And then our minds, well, hell, they're ruled by our hearts. Instead of the mind governing the heart and the heart influencing the mind, we have hearts that govern the minds, and they're not even inside of our own chest, but rather our hearts in other people's interests and other people's pockets. And so politically speaking, we become terribly unastute. Largely because we don't want to think of doing for self. So that's part of why I said, if you can't get out the country, then at least look at Freedom Nation, Georgia, and another one now, recently, Freedom, Georgia, where those, I think, 19 families came together and bought so many acres of land and they got their own town going. They're going to need different skill sets, or it's going to disperse. If they don't get different skill sets they need, it's not going to be there in a few years, or it's not going to be what it started off as. So we got to start thinking about, the middle of the road, or at least how to avoid going too far right and left, even in your understanding of certain things. And that's where the mind governs the heart. The heart is where part of your humanity is. But the heart must be subdued by the mind. The final decision must come from the mind. Because don't worry, your mind is not going to make a decision to destroy its own heart. So we just got to start looking at what is that middle road? What are the misconceptions that are easy to fall into? And to be honest with you, that's going to go into another topic of just basic literacy and reading and being willing to research things before you just jump on a bandwagon and believe it. No, Trump never posed with his parents and they were wearing Ku Klux Klan uniforms. That never happened. That's a Photoshop. But how many of us believe that he actually sat there and posed with his parents looking at a camera, facing a camera, while they wore this? Okay, now I'm not saying that you have to sit up and believe that he's pro-Black now. No, he's not. Maybe it's not his job to be. The point I'm making is a lot of us have a hard time weighing contradicting bits of information critically and coming to a conclusion that serves us as opposed to serving someone else. Okay, we don't expect anything from him, even though this picture is not true. You don't have to sit up and start photoshopping false images to prove a true point. Because even though uh, the truth is this: a lie can be used to teach a true lesson, but it cannot be used to tell a true story to back that lesson up. Yeah, I'm the guy that creates his own proverbs. That's part of how I teach English. A lie can be used to teach a true lesson, but it cannot tell a true story to back up that lesson. And so we got to start thinking about, even if something is sensationalized, what is your conclusion going to be based on? And stop imitating other people's talking points, especially people that hate us. People that, even if they don't hate us, they made their minds up. We must be at the bottom. We must stay at the bottom. Because America's success and strength is based on two things. One, stealing land from Native Americans that they murdered. And that's the ones that didn't die from the diseases. Just taking it. And by the way, there's a short YouTube clip on the environmental changes that occurred based on that. But that's another talk for another day too. Just suffice it to say, some have looked back and surmised that that cold winter in the cold summer in the 1800s, the summer that did not actually occur for some reason, had a lot to do with the way the environment was changing in the Americas, because the original Americans were dying from viruses that those dirty Europeans brought. And they were dirty. Everybody wrote back then how little they bathed. They even talked bad about each other for this. But that's another talk for another day too. Again, we sat up and we've looked at people who hate us, and we have surmised that this big plantation that they had us build for them at gunpoint is the best place to be right now. Failing to understand that they had us build it at gunpoint for them. And if you can't seize it and take it over after you built it, then you might as well go somewhere else and start over. Because believe you me, America's nothing without us. Because the other half of America's power was in stealing us and not paying for the labor. I'm not against reparations. Matter of fact, I'm for reparations, largely just because white folks ain't for it. But see, I don't just want reparations. I want white impoverishment. Yeah, I don't apologize for that. But then again, there's a logical reason for that too, as well as an emotional reason. Wealth is relative. If they're poor, automatically everybody else is wealthy. That's how the economies work. But nonetheless, if they don't have us, I mean, they done already stole all the land they can steal. They stole it from sea to sea. If they don't have us doing that labor anymore, and they don't have us to pull over and put frivolous fines on for crazy traffic violations and start charging interest on them and things like this, and they don't have us to lock up for things we didn't do anymore and use for cheap labor, then I'm sorry, they don't have a free get ahead card. Because really, that's the only secret. America's not powerful because they were so organized and so smart. America's powerful because they were organized and smart about how to take from others without giving anything in exchange, i.e. how to kill the original inhabitants of the land and take the land from them, and how to steal somebody else to go and work the land. Those are the two secrets to America's power. And we're sitting up here arguing about what we're going to do in America. Fool, what you're going to do is continue to do the free work. That's what you're going to do. And when you're not good for that anymore, they're going to try to bring somebody else in to do that. And guess who they're going to get to train your replacement? They're going to get you to train your replacement. Oh, make no bones about it. You want to talk about immigrants stealing jobs from black Americans? No, they didn't steal them. They were handed those jobs by somebody else, again, by the real enemy. But guess who they told to teach and train them? They still learn those skills from us. Welding? Yeah, they're learning welding from us. All the construction-based trades, they're learning them from us. So I'm just telling y'all straight away. Again, they got you arguing over bones with an immigrant that doesn't necessarily like or hate you, but is also a victim of the same oppressor, while that oppressor still continues to eat the meat. And that's where Tim Wise was correct. That's the whole game plan. I told you I spied on him. I've heard him talk about stuff like this. Oh, well, I had to go down to the business and because one of my Negro employees and another one from El Salvador were having an argument and they were about to tear the place up. Why don't you just fire one? We'll replace them with who? If I fire one, I got to find someone else. The other one's going to suggest one of his own, and then they're going to agree on things. You see, at least I know these two are not going to agree on anything that's going to undercut my business. See, that's what they don't. I've heard them talk like this before. So again, we got to keep our wits sharp about us, and we got to stop with these arguments that are based on somebody else's benefit and always benefit somebody else. If going in on the immigrants doesn't help us, then why are we doing it? I mean, granted, we might compete for the same job, but let's be honest. Even in this competition for the same job, do you think they crossed the border going into the States with the idea in mind that they're going to steal your job? And that's if they even steal it. Because one of the reasons that they can get in and stay in is because they're doing the stuff that even we've looked at and said, we're not going to do anymore because we don't have to. That's the whole point. At the end of it all, somebody's going to eat the meat and leave us to argue with each other over the bones. And we've fallen for it. So the mind has got to govern the heart. And we got to stop with this letting the heart step up all the time and let somebody with a black face come along and tell us that we're in a fight with some immigrants. No. They're supposed to work. I mean, we wouldn't be any happier if they were coming into the U.S. and they didn't work. That wouldn't make us any happier. So that's not the issue. They got to work to earn a living, so we also got to work to earn a living. Okay, fine. Why are we arguing about that? The real issue is, what is their attitude towards us who built that country that they're benefiting in and to which they want to go? And are they going to give us our due props and our due respect? And the answer is no. There is the reason why we got an issue with them. Again, we got to come to the right conclusions, even for the right reasons. And that's not what we've been doing. So that being said, look, thank you all for listening. I've been out here a long time. I'm going to straight tell y'all, I'm about to start cutting people off at this point when they get up on their, I mean, even if they get up on their own channels. Okay, I'm not going to sit up and blast you by name and call you out, things like that. But when people get up and they start talking about, oh, well, Trump is the best thing, instead of just pointing out individual things that Trump has done, good or bad, getting this convenient amnesia, I'm going to cut them off. But I'm going to let others know that this is a criteria by which you watch someone, because, see, a racist, even a partial racist, or a low degree racist that just kind of tones it down when they're in political office is still a racist. You see, it's not when they get into power that you start saying, oh, okay, well, look at the changes that they're making. No, it's before that point. If he wasn't a racist, and he may not even really hate black people. I think Trump doesn't like anybody, to be honest. That's honestly what I think about him. But if he really wasn't, if he was really good for us, then he would have said about the Central Park Five from the very beginning, okay, the evidence is that they're innocent. I apologize for calling for a death penalty for them because I didn't know the evidence of their innocence. They should be let out yesterday. And in reality, they shouldn't have been locked up for so long. When has Trump ever come out and said the police misconduct led to the incarceration of some innocent men? Has he ever said this? Y'all saw yesterday, he would not denounce white supremacy. And we've been sitting up here, we've been saying to black women, you need to denounce what we call black female fuckery, including the mating standards that a lot of them have, or the stereotypical lens through which they view and assess black men sexually and romantically and even maritally, reproductively, so to speak. We've said this before. We said if you are going to not condemn them, then you're part of it. You just want to do the same thing one day. We've been saying this to them. So how dare we turn around and then say to these white conservatives, well, I understand why you don't want to condemn white supremacy, because you'll sit up here and you'll say that feminism is a problem, misandry is a problem, which they are. They really are there. You'll say they do exist and they do harm men, and then you'll turn around and say white supremacy does not exist. Guess who used to say this a long time ago? White manosphere men, men's rights activists, MGTOW. They said this. They used to say the exact same thing. Oh, white supremacy doesn't exist, but feminism does. Toxic feminism. That's the problem. They did say this. And that's one of the reasons I didn't get into their manosphere. I listened, but I didn't get into their manosphere. I didn't know there was a black manosphere. And I'm going to tell y'all, yeah, I am somewhat disappointed. But more importantly than how I feel is what I know. And I know that this is going to be problematic and bothersome for us, that I can come into a black manosphere and then later on hear the same white supremacist talking points of those devils that I used to hear back in the early 2010s. Okay, so they want to put their feet back on the necks of their women. But it's wrong when we decide that we're not going to listen to them and leave them in positions of authority over us. I'm going to tell y'all straight. We always say to sisters, you let that white bitch come along and convince you with her feminism and turn you against us. Then you turn around and say, yeah, you know, I be laying down with white women. I don't care. I don't discriminate. That's seriously. You're going to give a chance to the same one that we know used to get us lynched. We know turned sisters against black men. And we know will take you to the cleaners even more than the sister will in divorce court. You're going to do that, but you're going to give her a chance to say you don't discriminate. Come on now. You can be militant, but you got to be consistent. And if you're going to be one-sided, you got to have a reason for doing so. Like I said before, I explained why I am so one-sided, because there were logical reasons for this. But we don't turn around and do hypocrisy just because we've seen that some ladies do that. Some of them do. Well, I don't know how many. Maybe more than half. It may be 30% and they're just loud. I don't know. I don't really care. What I'm saying is we don't turn around and become that just because we've seen them do that. But that's exactly what I'm sitting up looking at us doing right now. And then sitting up and saying, well, you know, white supremacy is not a thing and I'm tired of hearing about it. And no, it does exist. And yeah, there are going to be brothers that use it as a crutch. You get on the case of the guys that use it as a crutch. You don't get on the case of the guys that don't use it as a crutch or an excuse to not do anything, but who are actually telling you this is a barrier I faced when I was trying. That's a completely different thing. That's altogether different. You don't sit up here and say to these, you don't say to these women, well, yeah, you know, feminism's the problem. And you should be barefoot in the kitchen, pregnant all the time. Oh, but white supremacy is not there. No, it is. It is definitely there. 100, I would say 200% it is there. I've been spying on them. And I'm telling you, as a matter of fact, one of the reasons that I knew something was wrong with the white manosphere was because it was 2011, and that was the same year in which I was doing a lot of my spying, and especially 2012, when I was doing most of my spying on white folks. And I've been doing spying on non-black Arabs lately since I've been here. Not by pretending like I'm a non-black Arab, but just sometimes I don't tell them I'm black. They know I'm American, but I don't tell them that I'm black. And I just tell them, well, you know, I came here to get away from the racism. And they're like, oh, the black people hate us? Or they don't even say us really, but they say, oh, the blacks hate the whites. And I'm like, well, I mean, they don't hate black. I'll tell them, actually, black folks don't hate white folks enough. But then I'll say, it's no, we were the problem. We were doing certain things. And when black folks decide to rise up and kill us, we're going to be deserving of it. So I decided, I'm not, you know what? I decided we white folks don't deserve America. We stole it from the Indians. We made black people build it for free. I don't want to sit up and take things from them. So I came here. You know what I found these white Arabs say when I say this? They admit it. I ran an experiment a few days ago in a ride share. That was interesting, but that's beside the point. The thing is, getting back to this consistency again, we don't have a leg to stand on when we sit up and say, well, white supremacy doesn't exist at all, and it's not a thing, and I've never had to face it. And okay, you've never had to face it. Great. Move 2 counties over and see if it changes where they don't know you. Well, you're not one of the so-called good ones, or they don't know if you're one of the good ones or not. No, it does exist. White folks have always had a certain number of black folks for whom they would make an exception and allow them to move up a little bit. They've always had that. Always that's been the case. My grandfather He was that exceptional one in one town. They were going to lynch him in one town in which my father was born. They were going to lynch him because he stood up to a sheriff's deputy for flirting with my grandmother. So he moved. He didn't even leave the state. He went to another side of the state, started over, and um, he became the one black person that was practicing in that field at that time. So uh, they, in that town, they didn't know about this. They didn't know that on the other end of the state they were going to try to lynch him. He was unaware. They were unaware of this, and so he wound up doing fairly well for himself and for my dad and my dad's sibling and my grandmother. So they've always had these exceptions. But here's the thing: when my father when he finished his education, he had to look at where he was going to live, and he knew he couldn't live in his hometown. Why couldn't he live there? I didn't know this until I was grown, but he told me I couldn't live there not only because of the low mindset of the community there. I also couldn't go back to live because white folks were not going to tolerate two black men doing that well. They just weren't going to tolerate it. They were not going to accept that at this point in time. So he had to go elsewhere. Even though he was the son of the other one, they weren't even going to tolerate a father and son team there. You understand? They've always had these exceptions that they were willing to make. I mean, hell, in most of these towns, there was usually one black family that had guns and was willing to shoot at white folks if they had to. So guess what? White folks never made them shoot. This is also the case. So don't use you being an exception to try to prove the rule, or to try to prove that the rule is not there. It's always been there. The exceptions have always been there. Now what they're trying to do is get these exceptions. Hell, they don't even have to ask any of us at this point. They'll make an exception, and they know that exception is going to sit up and say, well, you see, what happened to me was, and they're going to put this out there like that's the rule, like that's always the case. No. That's not always the case. I've been pulled over by several cops. I've never been roughed up. But I've also seen a police officer rough up a friend of mine. That friend of mine wasn't very dark, but he was tall, big, and bald-headed. At that time, he was maybe 17. And no, he was 18 at that time, I believe, or 17. I can't remember exactly. I think he was 17, about to turn 18. And he was already 6'2". He weighed 200 pounds and he bench pressed 400 pounds. He was intimidating and he had never lost a fight. He still ain't to this day. He went into boxing in that circuit, local circuit. Only time he ever lost was when he would hit someone when they were on their knees because it took him a while to realize that the person was down. Cop decided to crack a flashlight over his head. And I knew that was going to be a problem. Because when he cracked the flashlight on my friend's head, my friend was bald at the time. My friend ducked his head, flashlight cracked. I'm glad no plastic hit me in the face. My friend looked back at the cop with no sign of pain or anything, and then punched him square in the mother cuss word face. White supremacy does exist. Okay, so I haven't witnessed a whole lot of police brutality directly. But it does exist. We've seen it. But more importantly, they get away with it. And so we don't have a leg to stand on when we sit up here and try to tell these ladies that feminism is a problem, because it is, and then turn around and then start supporting a white point of view. Their problems are their own fault. Don't get it twisted. Some of us are starting to think, well, we're falling victim to the same thing we told sisters not to fall victim to, and we want to blame them for this. And we rightly should blame them for this. You let Miss Ann come to you and tell you that I'm the damn problem, and you let her convince you of that. Okay, we have a leg to stand on then. But then we're going to turn around and let some white guys convince us of their political views that are anti-black and really anti-melanin of any form. We're going to let them come along and convince us of that and not argue. Or just dismiss them, and then convince us that it's all about our manhood. The problem is not black and white. It's that these women are oppressing men. Okay, they're telling you this because, believe you me, This whole idea of going back to the plantation, that's something that was their terminology. They used that. They were the ones that started that off. We've been saying if they're going to look, if Sapphire's going to act like this, Maria, Ling Ling, and Habiba can get it. We've been saying that. That's not something that they were saying. They've been talking about the ones that are one blowjob away from going back to the plantation. They were using our plantation terminology. But guess what? When these women decide, the ones that are misandrist, scandalous, hypergamous, and feminist at the same time, that's enough to be called scandalous because those two don't go together. But when these women were like that, they could go and pick these non-select men and get them back on the plantation. That was their problem. So what I'm saying is that just like that white woman at the end of the day is going to go back to her white husband, these white men at the end of the day, they could be convinced to go back to their white women. They could do it. They want to still convince you that you should never go back to sisters. And that might be a correct conclusion. And that might very well be a correct conclusion. You may never be able to go back to the black Western woman. Notice I said Western because remember, we don't only live in the West. Let's not forget that. We black Americans love to forget about other black folks until we start talking about ADOS this and ADOS that, and them other black folks need to hold their own nuts. And that's another problem there. You can disagree with somebody you're related to, but you don't disagree with them in a fashion out in the public from which other people unrelated to you could benefit. Because remember, we still got the same enemies. And by the way, let's call this what it is too. Africa paid for its sins. Africa paid for sins it didn't commit. Africa paid for its sins and Europe's sins. When is Europe and the white Western world and diaspora going to pay for its sins? That hasn't happened yet. And a few times it does happen when the forces of nature might come against it. The first thing they say is, well, God doesn't punish. Oh, God doesn't punish? So now they want to call God an irresponsible, unjust landlord because he doesn't punish wickedness until, of course, it's us. Then they move in and punish it. And then they want to say it was the punishment from God. But getting back to this, we got to keep in mind, brothers, you don't fall for the same thing because this is exactly what we've been getting on sisters about doing, listening to that white woman and get turned up against us. Now, some of us are listening to these ignorant ass devils that even white men are sick and tired of listening to. And we falling for this stuff. Not on a point by point basis because they can make valid points. They're bound to make valid points, but on a platform by platform basis. That's where the issue comes in. We start getting behind cats like Cruz, not just Trump, but also getting behind Cruz and getting behind others like Mitch McConnell. And before you know it, what have you done? You've gone too far. Because I bet you there was a day that Daniel Cameron was not as right wing as he is right now. And now look what he's doing. He didn't kill Breonna Taylor. He's just covering it up. That's what's really happening. And while he was saying that there were some things he couldn't do, Professor Black Truth put out a video, and I have to finish watching it, about how apparently he never gave the grand jury an option to indict. Now, do you really think that Daniel Cameron started his life off this way, pro-white and anti-black? And some would say, well, where's the evidence that he's pro-white and anti-black? Well, history is the evidence. Because we already know that if the Muhammad Nuru Justine Diamond case had happened in his jurisdiction, we already know there's no way that Muhammad Nuru would have gone free in Kentucky just because Daniel Cameron was the attorney general. We already know that would not have happened. There is no jurisdiction where this can happen. Hell, that black officer that just arrested and tased that white woman at a school and didn't even really rough up like that has been getting death threats. His own chief has pointed this out. That officer had to be transferred to another duty post somewhere for his own safety because they were going to kill him because white supremacy still exists and it is a goddamn problem. And that's the reason that feminism was ever started and then introduced to black women. So keep this in mind. I do say, yes, to be fair, as harsh as I can be on the Western sister, it's not out of hatred, it's out of a sense of justice. To be fair and to not blame anybody for something that they did not do, there's certain things I'm going to have to say against some of us Republicans and conservatives. Because while we do need moral conservatism, yes, we do need that. Even when we're not willing to show that to certain sisters for certain reasons, because they'll use that for the wrong reason, you know they will. Even still, we have to admit, as militant as I might have to be with sisters because of the choices that they've made in the abuse of the power that they have had over men, that women have had over men in general anyway, I still must say they have been victims. They've just been willing cooperative victims in many cases, but they have been victims. Let's not act like they haven't been. We're just not willing to accept the role that they've played in this victimization, this cooperation, this going along, this giving us these double conditions that you can't meet one because you can't have the other. Similar to the job market, you can't have the job because you don't have the experience. Well, you can't have the experience because you can't have any jobs. That's exactly what the mating market is like in Black America. White America too, for to a certain extent, but definitely in Black America, because that teenage bullshit goes on all it goes on into the 30s and 40s. Oh, well, he's inexperienced. I don't want him either. Oh, well, he's okay. Well, he's never going to get experience because nobody's wanted him before. You know, that whole nobody wants to be your first type thing. And it's up to them. They can choose that. They just got to deal with the consequences. Unfortunately, one of the consequences is men like Daniel Cameron. And I'm not saying that just because they didn't bend over his couch early enough in his life. I'm talking about the way that we treat each other in general, which oftentimes goes back to the way that we view each other as men through the eyes of Black women who themselves view us through the eyes of white supremacy. Shout out to Cortez Smith for saying that and Edward Anderson for repeating it. But we don't lie and say that Black women have never been victims. They've been lesser victims. We don't lie. We don't blame them for starting feminism. They didn't. They just took it to another level. They went too far with it. Sure. We don't lie and say they started it. We're not here to lie. Because again, a lie can be used to teach a true lesson, but it cannot be used to tell a true story to back up that lesson. They took it to a new level such that many of us look back now and think that sisters started it when in fact they didn't. Let's not tell that lie. We got enough to indict some people on with the truth. And that's why I've said we got to use the heart and the mind, which are towards the middle of the body, and stop arguing over the whites' left wing versus its right wing, because both of them are going to be used to keep the same bird aloft, and that bird is white supremacy, white domination. I mean, make no mistake about it. They're not going to let you vote them out of their privilege. That was never going to be the case. We're just lucky that we're allowed to get passports and leave. And if enough of us started doing that, they might try to come up with a way to stop that too, because they did that during they did that before the Second World War, when African Americans signed up to go and help Ethiopia repel the Italian invasion. Oh yeah, you didn't know about that, did you? I was told about this from a history professor in my college, so I haven't been able to find the documents to back it up. So in the spirit of what I've been saying, if you find that that was never the case, please let me know. However, what I was told was that the the State Department stopped issuing passports to Black people, which at that time they could do because your race was in your passport. I can find my father's old passport if I went back to the States and it's got Negro written on it. So, and even nowadays, your social security number is still tied to your race, believe it or not. So they probably could do something like that if they really want it. And if they decide to try that, you would know then that what you're on to is a solution. That's why they burned down Black Wall Street and other places like it. 250 of them in the Southeast alone. That's a longer list than what I can remember. I can't remember 19 of them. But 250 times has happened because that was a solution. We were on to something, and damn it, they knew it. If we started, how many of you drink coffee? In the chat, put a 1 in if you drink coffee. I'm going to let y'all on something right quick. Put in a 1 if you drink coffee. Those of you in the chat. If you can hear me, put a 1 in if you drink coffee. I guess nobody drinks coffee then. Everybody's a tea drinker, huh? Okay, I see. All right. So we got at least 2 now. All right. 3. And a tea drinker, because if you don't drink coffee, I'm going to assume you drink tea. I'm just being facetious like that. I'm just joking, HTS, but okay. All right. So we got coffee drinkers. Now check this out. I was told that coffee grinds after they've been used actually can be added to soil, and it's a good fertilizer, good for compost and fertilization. I'm not sure, but I was told that. Um, so let's say you start your own garden in your backyard, or even just if you're in an apartment, let's say you start one in your porch. Just maybe a few tomatoes, some cucumbers, let's say the basics, or some peppers. Just something just some vegetable you would eat a lot of. Let's say you do that. And let's say we all started doing this just for the purpose of having our own supplemental food that we don't have to go and pay somebody else for. And this became not an American thing to do, but specifically a Black American thing to do. I guarantee you at some point they would ban home gardens. In Atlanta, there was a point where they started doing that. They started banning home gardens in Atlanta. I don't know if they still have, but I heard about some folks that were getting fined because of that. And it was an incentive if you ratted on somebody else for doing it. You understand? Keep this in mind. Let's look at our Black mayors. Look at the Black mayors in the states. What Black mayor has not had trouble with federal law enforcement for some reason after their term is over? Think about it. I mean, the ones I know of, they've all had that trouble. They've all had that problem. The ones I can remember right now. So that's because, to a certain extent, political power at a local level was a solution. Now they changed it, but at that time, political power at a local level was at least the beginning of a solution. So what wound up happening? I'm going to put you all on mute while you all tell me the names. If in case I've got it wrong, I'm going to put the mic on mute and give y'all time to tell me about any mayors that may not have been in trouble, just so I can be on point. Hold on. Okay. All right. Wellington Webb and Mayor Dinkins. Okay, that does mean something. All right then. So I stand corrected that we do have some. Now, when I left the States in 2014, it was a different story. When I left in 2014, Nagin was in trouble. Campbell had served federal time. I think Kwame Kilpatrick just recently got out because of COVID concerns. I forgot the name of let's see, Andrew Young didn't get into any trouble that I know of, any legal trouble. So I stand corrected about that. But the point I'm making is that when you're on to something that is a solution, that's when you're going to start to face the opposition. So if you're going to face this opposition, then you got to learn from that every time. And you got to realize that that's going to be where the solution generally is. Now, if you face opposition one day and then you don't face it later on, that means that they've removed the way that that could become the solution. And so in the US, we could not vote at one point. What's going on, Mr. Taylor? Now we can. Now, they still try to disenfranchise a lot of us with the felonies. But in actuality, a lot of our push to be able to vote was more so in connection with juror pools so that we could have black jurors in these trials. That was actually one of the major reasons for pushing for voting rights. But keep this in mind, nowadays, they don't stop that. They don't stop you from voting outright legally. What's the reason? Because they've removed the solution. Now they've got it fixed. It's a dichotomy they give you, and neither one of these dichotomies is going to help you. If it was, it wouldn't be something you could vote for. That's who they are. And so I've been saying that repatriation is going to be necessary. And if the majority of sisters are stuck on America, you just got to leave them there and start looking at sisters in other countries. And I don't mean first world countries either. And of course, there are going to be guys that say, well, you limiting yourself to third world women because you can't handle women from the first world. Nobody can handle women from the first world. Women aren't supposed to be handled like wild beasts. Adults shouldn't need to be handled. I wouldn't go into a middle school classroom if I have to handle the kids, because once they hit puberty, they have the same moral reasoning capacity as somebody in their 60s and 50s. They don't have the same experience, but they've got the same moral reasoning capacity. They know right from wrong when they stop and think about it. So I don't tolerate that from middle schoolers. Why am I going to tell you? You got to tolerate that from some adults who talk about how independent and grown they are. So I'm telling you that you got to keep in mind what these solutions are, but nonetheless, you can't sit up here and fall victim to the same things that you're going to blame somebody else for falling for. If you're going to get on Sapphire and Boom Chic and Bonquisha because they let Becky and Amber and Karen talk them into this feminism and this attitude, and they took it to the next level with the neck rolling and the finger snapping, to the point that even Becky and Karen and Amber got impressed with the attitude and added that into their own little feminism. You can't turn around and then be turned against black women because you are conservative, or rather conservative. If you're going to be against them, it has to be based on what they've actually done wrong. That's for anybody. We're not here to start letting somebody else who has an interest in getting you to believe the wrong things about somebody tell you what to believe about them, while you know that they've got an interest and you believe in anything about them that's bad and nothing about them that's good. It doesn't work that way. We got to stop with this mess. So you want to be, the thing is this, some of you are so sick of the liberalism and the harm that it has caused to us, rightly so, that you want to start to promote what's going to actually work. Fair enough. That's why my moniker always has the word black in it. Then you need to be a black conservative, not a Republican. Even if you're going to be a liberal, why don't you be a black liberal? Some of us will say, well, that's very limiting. No, actually, this is the world in which it's becoming increasingly unpopular to be white. And we need to make ourselves distinct. That's the other thing. We need to do this because people are going to be much more apt to treat us differently when we are abroad if we make ourselves distinct. Because people do, I mean, there are parts of the world where people, even if they bleach, they still look at the way that Europeans behave. And mostly the European Americans and Australians, they're going to look at the way that they behave and they're going to say, I don't want to behave this way. I don't want to act this kind of way, even while I'm bleaching, even if I dye my hair blonde or something like that, or put in blue contact lens. You can ask Art Zuck about that. Walaikum salam, Abdullah. You can ask Art Zuck the same thing. Art Zuck will tell you they bleach in his country, but by the same token, they look at the actual Caucasian as a lazy weakling and an oppressor. That's how they view them there for the most part, even while they're bleaching. and sometimes maybe even dyeing their hair blonde, they still look at them this way. I think they call them orang bule, if I'm not mistaken. And orang means people, but bule, I know that's not the word for white, because puti is the word for white in the Bahasa. So if puti is the word for white, then bule must have another, it must have another meaning. And I take it that it's probably derogatory. It's just like in Ethiopia. The word for white is just nuch in the Amharic language, but they call them nachachaba, which means white or honky or something like that. People actually do take issue with them more than what we may know. Yeah, white supremacy is global or international, let's say, but it does have its limits, and it is perfectly, as a matter of fact, it's very useful for us because of certain cultural popularity that we have. It's useful for us to translate that into some substance by being differentiated, very different and distinct from the ones that kidnapped us and brought us over to the Americas in the first place. Just like over here. I'm over here trying to make it easy for you. I'm up here telling these folks, whether I tell them I'm black or not, I'm telling them the problem in America is white folks, straight up and down. Even they admit it. The kids are sick of this mess. That's why the kids are out there sometimes protesting, other times rioting. They've gotten to a point where now they're shooting and beating each other up over this stuff because they're sick and tired of this. Black folks aren't the problem. I'm letting them know. They got some of them that want to go and study in the States, and they want to ask me, well, you know, what if I go to this city, where's the mosque that black folks go to? Because I know they ain't gonna mess with me. I'm like, bruh, there's no mosque where they're gonna mess with you per se, but it's too late now. Everybody knows about the lazy golf student that cheats. So there's not really a safe place for you now. I mean, there's not a place where you're gonna necessarily be respected, but you could be protected if you go to these particular ones where black folks go. But understand, you can't be that, you know, you can't be lazy, academically speaking. You can't always be asking them to do your work for you, your schoolwork, write your reports for you. Then they're gonna start saying, okay, this cat's lazy. This is not a man. But the point I'm making is that I'm doing what I can to make it easy for you, so that if you do come here later on, you got a better shot. And you know what? Some other brothers have already done it before me. Because I've had some talks with some of these cats out here, and they told me, yeah, man, when I was studying in the States, it was black folks that were defending me. When white folks were starting on their stuff. Yeah, when I was studying in the States and this professor wanted to say that I didn't do the work that I actually did, it was, you know, it was black students that stepped up and said, no, he did what he was supposed to do. He did the work. I helped him do it. We went to the library together. They were the ones saying, no, you just putting him through that because he's from somewhere else, or probably because he's Muslim and more so because he's Arab. But, you know, now they starting to tell me about this. And here's the thing. Okay, I see what you're saying, Abdullah bin Bobby, that they bleach their skins as a sign of femininity. But see, that's the thing. Who said it? You know, who said that that's feminine? Where did they get that from? Where they pull that out? You know, they just pull that out there behind. We could say, well, it has to do with the sun and all of that. But I mean, even still, nowadays, they're still doing that. And but then again, I've also heard that they tend to prefer a darker tone in men. I've heard that too. They say even in Thailand that's happening. They got a brother, I mean, an African-American cat, and he's in one of them travel groups. And the travel group that he belongs to, he said that he envisioned going to Southeast Asia and finding a dark-skinned cutie. And he's being chased after these really pale, ghostly looking ladies with their hair bleached blonde. And this is what he's talking. He was complaining about this. So if we're not going to let sisters blame us for being colorist in ways that we're not, that's cool. Defend yourself. But you don't resort to doing the same thing and blaming them for things they didn't do, like starting feminism. Don't blame them for stuff like that. Do not sit up and say that a black woman had anything to do with a black man being lynched unless there's some evidence of it. Now, if there's evidence of it and you can say this is one such case, I'm not telling you to hide that. I'm just saying that if you can, I'm simply saying that if you have some evidence of it, then you go ahead and say it. But if you don't have any evidence of it, don't say something like that. Don't blame someone for something he didn't do just because you win an argument with him. Because if you do something like that, you're going to ruin your own credibility. What happens when you actually find out about something that they did wrong, and then you blaming them for that? But then how you gonna prove it? Because see, a false accusation today is the same thing as an exoneration once you're proven to have falsely accused somebody. It's the exact same thing. If you want to get somebody off the hook for something that they actually did, blame them for things they didn't do, and do it again and again and again and get caught lying. Before you know it, you're going to find out something that they actually did, and you're going to blame them for it, and they're going to get off. All right. So I'm looking at the comments now. Um, yeah, Amir Mamdour, the royal family. You must be talking about Saudi across the border from me. I got you. Yeah, because I'm not far from the border with it. Um, and well, yeah, I know because you said royal family. So um, Amir Mamdour, he may. And the funny thing is that I've seen that. I've actually seen that here. And I've seen some places where, especially some of the teenagers, they actually have like an obsession with the black convert. But they don't come out and say, I'm obsessed with black converts. It's not that. But there's some of them that actually have, like they focus on them more. And I think it's because they get a sense of manhood from that too. I imagine that that's what it is. There was one that, I mean, he was obsessed to the point I had to cut contact with him. I didn't hate the guy, but he was young and he was a little too far gone. I'm not going to get into that, but that does exist. And that's the thing. When you come here, there are going to be some people that actually you get a leg up on white folks in certain ways. Not when it comes to marriage, though. That's not the case. But then again, black liberation is more important than where you have the option to stick your genitals. I'm just saying that in their mind, that's where they draw the line. They're not completely mentally free to the point that they can tolerate the idea of getting darker. Yet and still, they will favor you, because one of the common sayings I've heard here is the whitest hearts are in the blackest people. Like I said, I don't take that white heart thing as a compliment. That's why I chose the name Black Heart, just to offend their sensibilities when I first started the channel. But but still in all, that does exist here. And you can go into Southeast Asia and there are going to be people that actually prefer you over white folk, whether it's as friends or even if it's as lovers. Hopefully you all listening are not into that pay for play thing. But what I'm saying is that there are actual preferences. There are parts of the world where you actually get preferred over Europeans. Now, my litmus test is, do you still prefer the African over the European, the one from the continent? Big lips, wide nose, blue, black, 4C hair, and a name that sounds like something out of a Tarzan movie with big feet. Now, do you still prefer them over the Europeans? That's my real litmus test. Like that's my highest litmus test. But nonetheless, to me, it's a start when they prefer Black Americans or Black Caribbean people over Europeans. And I mean European Americans too, when I say that. And there are places in the world where that does exist. That does happen. In actuality, in the Hijaz, I saw that because I've been to Medina twice, and I can say this: when I went to Medina, every time I've gone to Medina, I've traveled with somebody. I'm sorry, 3 times, and the 2 times I went to Medina, and I traveled with some brothers from the states, Somalia, the UK, and from Sudan, from different areas. We were all treated well. Then I went by myself, and I wasn't mistreated, but people were just quiet. I'll say that. Matter of fact, the Filipinos were the ones that talked to me the most. That was the funny thing. And then when I went with my wife, we were treated well. I mean, everybody was friendly to both of us. So there are places in the world you can go and they're going to be more friendly to you as somebody of African descent. It does exist. That is the case. And we also have to be careful about that, because a lot of us, as we like to go too far, and we go too far right or too far left, there are a lot of us that like to spout the same rhetoric that we've heard from before. That's not true. Everybody hates us. The whole world hates us. No, no, a lot of people do, or they look down on us. Actually, let me rephrase that. A lot of people do look down on us. Not everybody hates us. And then there are people that don't look down on us. But you got to get out there and see the world to know this. This is where a non-black man was correct. A non-black man and I are obviously not friends. He insisted on the beef because light skin motivation insisted on the beef. So he backed her up because he's a loyal friend. I guess if he and I had been friends from before, and then he met her through this beef, then he probably would have backed me up against her, even if I was wrong. Point I'm making is he and I ain't friends. Not because I hate him, but we ain't on the same side. But he did make a valid point. When you leave, you will find that there is curiosity without hatred as well. You will see a range of attitudes. You'll see that. And so he was right about that. And I had to admit, that's a valid point. I can't sit up here and say, well, because he wants to beef with me, everything he says is a lie. No, no, you can go to parts of the world where, maybe they're ignorant about you. Art Zuck in Indonesia will tell you about that. There are people in Indonesia, they don't mind. They like to know more about black folk. They're going to ask you dumb questions, but they don't mean any harm because they're curious. They actually would rather know more about you. And to a certain extent, there is a preference for us over Europeans amongst some of the Indonesian people. You can ask him about that. Now, I think it's about 1:30 where he is. So he's probably in the Friday prayer now and can't hear this. But usually he's in the chat and he'll tell you, we have certain associations that we make with the orang bule. So if you're going to go too far to the right or to the left, in any case, you're going to believe the absolute worst, most pessimistic thing there is to believe about the rest of the world outside the United States. And you're going to believe it because you got used to doing that when you let somebody tell you that let's say, let's say you went too far to the left and you let someone tell you that Trump posed for a photograph with his parents and they were wearing Klan uniforms. If you're too far to the left, you're going to believe it right off the bat. You see? If you're too far to the right, you're going to say rightly so, that photograph was photoshopped. And the real one, his parents were just wearing, his dad was wearing a suit and his mother was wearing some elegant party dress. And Trump had on a suit. You're going to rightly say that. But then you're going to say, this is all lies. Trump doesn't have a racist bone in his body. And he's never been a racist. Well, I don't know what he is now, but he has been one before. He's been called out for it. He may not hate us, but there's a certain disdain he has. There are spaces that he wants to see free from black people, not even for any cultural reasons, but because we're black. And if that's not the case, he still is willing to cater to racist customers in his businesses. That's the very minimum right there. And he doesn't pay people what he owes them. That's the other thing too. So then they'll turn around and say, Trump is a saint. He's the best thing to ever happen to America. And he's not a racist. That's what happens when you go too far right or too far left. We can't afford that. This is not something that we black folks can't afford it, because every false belief we have has come back to bite us in the butt. White Jesus ain't come back. He ain't came out the sky to free us from other white folks. I'm a Muslim. I believe in Jesus and I believe in his return. But these false beliefs that we've had even about him have not necessarily paid off. It hadn't even benefited us to believe that he looked like the way they depicted him in those photos. Where did that benefit us? What did that get us? That's the number one image behind our inability to retaliate. And I mean our psychological inability to retaliate. That's a false belief. Just what he looked like was a false belief. That gave us another false belief about what God looked like. How did that benefit us? Most of us are not atheists. We can't, a lot of us find it hard to be an atheist because we know there's got to be a beginning to everything. And it has to be that one source that doesn't need a beginning for everything else to have its beginning. So we understand that naturally. But how has that belief benefited us that that God looked like Jesus? That further cemented our inability to retaliate. What other beliefs have we had? That we can appeal to their conscience and their humanity, and that's going to get us forward without us having to go somewhere else outside of America, that plantation that we built at gunpoint for them. That didn't help us either. Because we've been sitting up here marching and taking all them butt whoopings to try to get ahead. And every time we got ahead, we went further behind. And now we're to a point where we're arguing with each other. We can't even form couples that stay together, let alone families. So how are we going to have stable communities? Can't do it. If when we get together, we can't stay together. Then it's the same thing with the Europeans too. They got the same problem. I got some, yeah. I think I got 2 10s and a 50. If you have to, yeah. By the way, I'm not on mute now. I'm not on mute. Okay, so I'm letting those. All right. So if we believe that we can just appeal to their humanity and their conscience, how did that benefit us? Now the family's in trouble. It was in trouble before. Now it's completely in even more trouble. So now they want us to think that every other country is a crap hole country. The rest of the world is a crap hole country, except for white nations. And they want us to think this way for a particular reason. And so what is the reason though? Well, let's see. If you were to go to Sweden, I think the kron is a unit of currency, but I could be wrong about the country. Now, let's say you got about 10 grand saved up, US. I don't know what that is in crons. You're going to be able to start a good business, start off at the top, even at the middle. Can you do that? Are you going to be able to take care of your needs while you are trying to get that business off the ground? And you got 10 grand US that you can use to both put into the business and take care of yourself? I mean, there may be a plan that could do that, but I'm not an expert in business, and most of us aren't. So how many of us could do that? This is exactly why it is that they want you to think this way. The currencies of these other countries are depressed, but what that does mean is that the US dollar goes a lot further. That fact alone is not only good for tourism, but it's also good for starting a business as long as you can do so legally. That's what they don't want you to know. And yeah, that's right. In Eastern Europe, Jay Sean Randoms is right. He's on to something. Eastern Europe got some busted up countries. But what they want you to think, what Trump wants you to think, is that all these places are crap hole countries, largely because of the economy. Okay, so Kareem's not working. Gotcha. Okay, so what's happening there, wacky world? So let's say you look at the rest of the world that he calls crap hole countries. These are countries where, yeah, administratively, it can be a problem. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. I'm not starting a business in Nigeria until they get rid of that corruption. If all the paperwork is impossible and you just got to start greasing palms and paying out bribes, I'll never go to Nigeria to start up a business. But see, the other thing too, you got to understand is that these are nations where 10 grand can take you away, and they can take you a long way. And you can start something that's going to make some money for you so that you don't even have to use up the entire 10 grand. That's what they're not telling you. And so if you believe what either one of them says, the far right or the far left. You're not going to come up with a plan that's actually good for you because you're not going to be thinking in your own interest. And that's how they weaponize the right and the left against you. When you actually have a black heart and a black mind, which is what you need, which is why I took these monikers on in the first place, as a hint to you in the audience. When you have one, you start thinking about what's good for you, individually and collectively. You don't give up one for the other. Well, sometimes you might have to you may have to prioritize the individual over other people. You may be forced to do it. You may be compelled to do so. But what I mean is that when you're not compelled, you don't give up one over the other. You look at what's good for both. But ultimately, you're going to be looking at what's good for the black team. And even that has a limit. There's a balanced way to assess that. When you're looking at what's going to be best for the black team, you got to understand that everybody in the uniform ain't on the team. As we say, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. So then you got to start looking at, well, what is best for the kinfolk? There's your balance right there. Where's this black heart and this black mind balance coming in? Well, what does that mean? That's what it means. You look out for what is good. Now, if you can do something that is better for the entire population, you go ahead and do it. You can afford it. But if you can't, then you start looking at what is better for the black conscious population, the black aware population. You start doing what's good for them. And we already know we got a lot of pro-wax in the ranks. At this point, people claiming to be pro-black, oftentimes more of them, more of the ones that you will hear doing this or saying this, are not really living it. So in other words, either people are walking the walk or they're talking the talk, but very few people are doing both. I'm trying to do both, but I can't afford to publicize who I am. So you can't count me as amongst those ranks. I'm trying to do it, but I'm not even going to tell you I'm successful in doing it. I'm just simply saying that right now what we got is a situation in which when people identify themselves as pro-black, then they don't walk the walk. And if they do walk the walk, you only know after you've known them a long time, and you'll never hear them talk the talk to identify themselves. So that's the other thing to consider. Another thing you got to think about. But even in being pro-black, even your pro-blackness to a certain extent is going to have to be tempered, balanced, and mediated. You're not going to be able to sit up and say, yeah, man, look, I'm pro-black. I'm going to do what's right for the black population, even when it comes down to how I run my business. Because what does the black population want? Pro-black people want you to succeed. If they have the money to spend with you, they will spend with you. Even if they don't tell you that they are pro-black, they'll just spend it if they have it. But what does the black population want? What do the skin folk want from you? I'll let y'all type that into the comments. Y'all tell me in the comments, what do most black folk want from you when you open up a business? And T3, you got a point. Blackouts and corruption can be a problem. It's true. But you know what? What happens when that starts in the States? Is that going to run us away from the States too? Yeah, exactly, Goshen. They want a hookup. Some of them might come from jobs, but what they want is a hookup. That's true, a discount. They're not looking for, sorry, I dropped something. They're not looking for what you actually need. Oh, what does it say? Does it give a price estimate?
20 to 25.
Okay, all right. All right, they should put on the, if they don't have the change, they have to put the rest on your account. All right, you got everything you need, right? You got your tablet and all that?
I don't get it.
You sure?
Yeah. Oh, baby.
Yeah.
The thing is, they're closing before the Salah.
Okay.
So I don't think I'm gonna go back there. I'm just gonna go to the new one and come back here.
All right, fair enough then. I'll see you when you get back, inshallah.
Text me whatever you want.
Fair enough, Ken. Oh, it's just the cereal, one of them healthy, the same one you like. And then the grapefruit juice, that's it. Grapefruit juice. So I'm looking, babies. So they should be looking for a job. Sometimes they come to you for a job. But the hookup is the one, and the discount. Goshen and Redliner, they've explained what it is that stops a lot of us from going into business. Because to be honest with you, here's the thing. Business has a secret. There's a secret to having a business as a black person. If you're black and you're going to own a business, what's the secret to making it succeed? Now, I'm asking in case any of you already know the answer, but I'll tell you if you don't. I'm asking in case somebody has seen what that is, because there was a movie about it. And I'll give you all a hint about the movie. I think Anthony Mackie is one of the actors in it, and I forgot who the other one is. It might be Brother Jackson. Samuel L. Mother Cuss Word Jackson. I think he was the other one in there. But they got a movie about how they had a black-owned business and how they got it to succeed. Does anybody remember? Has anyone seen the movie and know the secret? I've mentioned it before. Well, all right. The secret was you don't let people know it's black-owned. In that movie, they got a white guy to play as the front, but you don't let people know that it's black-owned, and that's the secret to have a black-owned business succeed. My mother's friend had a business in New Orleans. It succeeded. I think it's still open. Why did it succeed? Largely because she didn't let people know she owned it. She pretended like she was a manager. A friend of mine in my own town had a business, and people didn't ask him for the hookup because he never said that he was the owner. He put a picture of a white guy on the wall, just some white guy, printed up a portrait size copy of it, framed it, put it on the wall behind him. And when they would say, "Who's that? Is that the owner?" He would say, "Yeah, he just happened to be here one day when I was looking for a job, and he usually ain't here, so I lucked up and got this job. Also, you can't really do no discounts or nothing." He's like, "No, I don't have the codes." And you know what? When they knew when they thought that it wasn't black owned, they stopped talking about discounts and hookups, and they would pay full price for what they wanted. And that's how my friend's business succeeded for the time that it did. It wound up failing because another business partner was using a business credit card on snacks. So if you are, in fact, going to take this pro-blackness to its proper balance, that means that you're going to have to start looking at what is good for pro-black people and not always black people. When you can afford it, you look at what's good for black people. When you can't, then you got to prioritize other pro-black people over just black folk. In other words, you got to prioritize kin folk over skin folk. That's the balance when it comes to that. Everything's got its balance. And that's, that I know it's a hard thing to always be mindful of. I get that. But sometimes we lose sight of these things because we let people talk us into overextending ourselves, telling us how much brother, you can do this, you can do that, you can do anything. Before you know it, you got too much on your plate and you can't balance that, just mentally speaking. That's been one of the mistakes. Because even when people come to us and they give us wisdom and advice, that's actually when we drop our guard the most and let people get us off balance, even if they didn't mean to do it. That's the other mistake. See, one of the most important times to be thinking with this balance is not when there's nobody around to advise you. It's when people are coming to you to advise you and encourage you. When there's nobody around to advise you, and when people are coming to you to advise you, are the two times to be thinking and balance the most. The time you can most afford to drop your guard and rest is when you overhear advice that people are giving to each other without knowing that you're listening. Okay, then you can afford to drop your guard. And that's assuming that you know the motives of the people talking. But other than that, no. People come to you with advice. You got to start thinking, how much do they know what they're talking about, even if you trust their intentions. There's the intention, and then there's their expertise. Now, does their expertise match their good intention? Maybe not. So they don't mean you any harm, but you still got to listen through a filter. Just like they got to do when you're giving them advice, because you're bound to make a human error when you don't mean any harm, let alone when someone comes to you and they got an ulterior motive. So yeah, we're going to have to be that group of people We black folks are going to have to be that group of people that really exceed others in balance. This is paramount. This has to be. We don't have a choice. We don't have an option. Because see, other people, again, other people are not better than we are. We keep thinking that. We keep thinking they all just more together than we are, and they're on point and their businesses are succeeding and that kind of thing. That's not necessarily the case. What is the case, though, is that because white supremacy is an international structure intended to be global, they can get away with their flaws if we're around, and we can't. That's what happens. Now, when you remove us from the equation, they don't get away with their own flaws. In other words, these other groups of people to whom we always look up as examples, when they're not, go back to their countries and then you're going to see the riffraff. You want to see a trifling Jordanian? You can see him. You just got to go to Jordan to find him. That's all. Just as an example. And that's part of that balance. We can't keep thinking other groups always got together. We just got to understand that when we're in the room, they have a cover. Because see, David Carroll has said that white skin covers a multitude of sins. But even then, for intermediately shaded people, our black skin diverts from the multitude of their sins. It diverts attention. And so, others, when we're around, they can get away with more. They can be more trifling. They're allowed to hide it because, hey, when you want to look at dysfunction, you look at us. You don't look at that Chinese American family that's $1 million in debt because dad's stunting and trying to keep up with the Joneses. You don't look at that Indian American family whose daughter has had several abortions because she knows that when she gets older, she has no say in who she's going to marry unless she rebels against the family. So she knows that, so she's got to get it in while she can. I mean, they don't tell you about the dysfunction. You have to find some of their young people from those communities, talk to them honestly as friends, and maybe look at some of the short films that their filmmakers have made and submitted to film festivals to even find out that these issues exist among them. But if we were to take this balance and we don't have the issues that they have, all of a sudden we've exceeded everybody else in balance. And that balance is what we need. And the way that we look at Africa, we got to be balanced. I'm telling you this as a Pan-Africanist. We got to be balanced in the way we look at Africa. 54 countries, they can't be the same. They're not supposed to be the same. And the way those borders were drawn up, every region of the same country is not supposed to be the same. Things are supposed to be different from region to region in an ideal situation, let alone the anti-ideal situation in which they inherited their borders. So you got to look at it with balance. They're not holy cows. They're not supermen. They're not to be romanticized the way that we've oftentimes done. Everybody's a king and everybody's a queen. Somebody got to sweep them floors and take out the trash, just to be fair. And it doesn't make them less human when they do it. It just makes them human for the good and the bad that it is worth. They are human. But we were taught to not view them as human. And then on the imbalanced pro-black circles, we were taught to view them as gods and goddesses. They from back home, they sacred. No, they can do some corrupt, foul mess too. Happened to Akon. I mean, Akon, the way Akon was behaving, it was the most negatively stereotypical. It was the most idness behavior you could have. And he sat up and told DJ Vlad about it. We all know about that. Calling himself Convict on his own album. But by the same token, he's trying to build something that is environmentally friendly in Senegal. The good and the bad. We got to have that balanced view even when we're talking about the motherland. But by the same token, they don't hate us. That's not true. And we've set up and taken these two imbalanced goals. I mean, these two imbalanced views. On one hand, it's like, oh, that's the motherland. They're going to welcome me as soon as I land. Land where? You're forgetting that it's too, you're forgetting that it's too big to be one airport, one village, one town, one language, one way of dressing. You're forgetting that. If you rolled Africa up into a ball, it would be the size of the moon. That's a planetoid. That's bigger than Pluto. So it can't all be the same. And then on the flip side, there's, oh man, them Africans sold us off into slavery and they hate us. And they've always hated us, even when we was back over there. Oh, what? So there was such a thing as an African American back in Africa, and they hated us then. That's why they locked us up and sold us to the white man to get rid of us. These are the two imbalanced ideas. The balanced view to take is that they're not walking around thinking about you every day. But by the same token, if the subject of us comes up, they're going to have different views, but most of them don't hate us unless they heard that we hate them, or maybe they lost a relative in a robbery over in the States. That's happened before. Some of them have lost uncles and relatives and just, regular street crime incidents in the United States. But outside of that, they're not walking around hating us saying, oh man, I'm so glad that our ancestors sold off those African American niggas a long time ago and we got rid of them. The continent's been so much better since then. That doesn't even make sense. In most history classes in universities throughout the continent, they know that the west and the central portions of the continent got depopulated. Areas that were roads between civilizations and settlements became wilderness. So they know that this depopulation and the destabilization led to the ability to colonize. See, colonization didn't officially happen until 1884. The slave trade was over by that point. That's what people don't realize. But the slave trade had ravaged the continent to the point that even when it was over, at least legally, even at that point, still depopulation was going on. That's what people haven't come to understand. Everybody that was taken away from home did not necessarily arrive on a plantation. A lot of them died in transit, en route. So the depopulation was actually more severe than the numbers that made it into certainly the United States, but maybe even the Americas altogether. And history will give you a balanced perspective on things. The problem is that we don't like to, we love to talk, but we hate to read. And I don't always like to read. Hell, I don't always have time. But that's part of the balance. If you hate to read, fuck the shuck up and don't say anything. We can't afford to listen to you if you never read. You won't know what you're talking about. If you don't even know how to write, don't write to us. If you're a terrible writer in your own first language, we can't afford to read what you write. Sorry, but we can't afford that. This balance is something that we can start with in looking at the opposite gender, because naturally we're interested in the opposite genders. Men and women are naturally interested in each other. It's just that women are very uninterested in the majority of men. That's all, because they're picky. But this is an easy thing with which to start this process of balanced thinking, because in this process of balanced thinking, when it comes to the opposite gender, most of us men aren't going to sit up and say, well, even if ladies change the way they view us, we just going to leave them alone and wait till the sex robots come out. Most of us ain't going to say that. Even now, what many men are saying is, well, now that I've got red pill awareness and red pill knowledge, I'm going to go elsewhere where the game is different, where it's less of a game. That's what a lot of us are saying. So there's an incentive to look with a balanced view at the opposite gender if you're not too intellectually lazy to do it. So let's say we do that. Then we can take that balanced way of thinking into other things. And I've said before that Islam was a solution. I've said it unabashedly, with no shame. I've been saying this. Well, guess what? If Islam is a solution, one of the reasons I'm telling you that it is because in the Quran, there are verses that say to you, don't let your hatred of a people drive you to commit oppression. There's another verse that says that when you hear something wrong or you hear something bad about someone, try to verify it so that you don't wind up oppressing them and regretting it later. I forgot what the exact chapter and verses are. I think Abdullah bin Bobby knows at least which chapter they're in. But at the end of the day, those verses were in there when you translate them into English. That's what they said. This is a balanced way of thinking. You're not told to turn the other cheek. Fight those who fight you. If they're inclined towards peace, accept it. If someone comes to you and they want to ask questions about Islam, arrange for them transit to a safe place so they can get their questions answered. Don't punish people for things they did not do. And if you can prove they did it for certain things, forgiveness could be better. But then for other things, when you can prove that they did it, you can't let mercy sway you. It depends on what the offense is. This is one of the starts right there. If I seem to be so balanced, and thank you to those who have said that I am, I do try to be. But if I seem to be so balanced, it is because of a wisdom and guidance from out of this world. It's like Malcolm said, the mistakes were mine. What I did right was because of Allah. So when I'm telling you that it's a solution, I've already said, look, don't take my word for it. Look into it. I've already said that before. Don't believe it just because I said it. But this is one of the evidences. This balanced way of thinking that I picked up, I got from my upbringing, from my parents. But then when I didn't live with them anymore, I got it a second time when I was reading just the English translation of the Quran. Just the translation. But we're all going to need this balance. Even if you're going to stay on another faith. In the meantime, while you're here on this planet, you're going to need that balance to avoid paying extra for mistakes that other people don't have to pay the same price when they make. Because as I said before, everybody ain't together. And everybody in the world don't hate black folks. But it is still set up to where we don't get away with the things we do wrong. Look at Africa. The slave trade happened by force. People were held hostage on the coast so that their relatives would have to go into the interior to grab people as a ransom for those loved ones that were being held hostage. That was one of the things that caused the raiding inside of the interior of Western and Central Africa. They don't tell you this. They don't tell you how they used guns, alcohol, and hostages to get people to go in and raid others from the interior and drag them to the coast. They don't tell you this. They just say Africans were trading each other as slaves and the white man just bought them. Everybody was doing that. That's what they tell you. But what does this have to do with what I just said? Well, like I said before, Africa did something. You could say that Africa committed certain sins, if you even wanted to call it Africa back then. And the sins that Africa committed by compulsion, Africa's still paying for to this day. And where you can see Africa in the Americas, meaning black neighborhoods and black areas, are also paying for those sins of the past. If you have the balanced view, you will understand that there's no reason for us to turn anti-African like many of us have been starting to do lately. And I'm not going front. I'm going to go ahead and say it. People sitting up and saying that we were in the Americas before Columbus, that's not anti-black. But if you're sitting up and saying that we had nothing to do with Africa, we were never in Africa at all, that sounds to me to be anti-African. That sounds like something that a white supremacist would want you to believe. It doesn't benefit anybody for us to believe that except for white supremacists. It doesn't benefit Africans for us to ignore the genetic evidence and the cultural and linguistic evidence that corroborated this even before DNA technology. It doesn't do them any benefit for us to disbelieve the historical records. It doesn't benefit us. So who does it benefit? It would benefit someone that wants to see black folks divided. Who would want to see black people divided against each other? A white supremacist. That's it. So why would some of us sit up and say, I ain't from no Africa? My ancestors ain't came from Africa either. It's not wrong when you say, look, I'm a member of the Choctaw tribe and I have Choctaw ancestry, if you actually have that. It's just wrong when you sit up and say, I don't have no ancestry from Africa. I got nothing to do with Africa. Man, please miss me with that. Because I've talked to people who say this stuff. And you know what I noticed? If you show them a DNA result that links them to some Middle Eastern family today, or you show them some DNA result that links them to, let's say it links them to ancient Australia, maybe. Or you show them a DNA result that links them to Thailand. They'll get off into those cultures. And if they even have a last name, a family name, that their DNA most closely matches, they will try to reach them and contact them. I know an African American that did that. He started buying into this "we ain't African" business. DNA technology is not true. But he got a DNA test done, and it showed that he was related to a particular tribe here in the peninsula, and he's been trying to reach them, trying to make contact with them. If there was a phone book here, he would have gone through the phone book and just started calling the numbers with that last name. Hey, I'm part of your tribe. But when it came to Africa, and he doesn't mistreat African people, but when it came to Africa, he would tell me I was crazy for saying that we were from there. Well, you see, what is the balanced view to take of that? Obviously, we're from there. That's what the evidence says right now. DNA, linguistic, genetic evidence. But were we in other places before Europeans got there? Yes, absolutely. Even other people have said this. If you go into Malaysia and Indonesia and you say that you're orang asli, now asli is the Arabic word for original. And even in the Bahasa languages, it's the word for original. You say you are orang asli, that means you're one of the original people on that island. Those people are black, and they all know that. There are people from Kenya and Tanzania sometimes that joke when they live in Malaysia or Indonesia, they may joke with the citizens there and say, "Saya orang asli," that means I'm an original. And people will laugh and giggle a little bit because they get the joke, because black folks were the first ones there. And everybody will tell you that. That's not even controversial. No, they were the first ones there. Everybody says that. In the Philippines, first ones there were the black Filipinos, and the people in the Philippines will tell you that. So what I'm getting at is that you can sit up and say that you have been in places outside of the motherland before Europeans got there. You could say that and be truthful when you got the evidence to back it up, and there is such evidence. Runoko Rashidi went to Fiji, and he said that the black Fijians there know they came from Africa. They even know that they came from Eastern Africa. Now, that's what Runoko Rashidi said. If he's lying, it ain't on me. I'm just telling you this what he said, and he's been to Fiji. So I got no leg to stand on to tell him otherwise or to tell you otherwise. But to sit up and say that we ain't from Africa, that's where the imbalance comes in. Why do we insist on disowning Africa? What the hell does that sound like to those of us that had grandmamas that used to say, I'm full-blooded Indian, and they weren't? Huh? You see where I'm going with this? This is what happens when we let somebody throw us off balance. And we're always doing it. And this time I'm seeing us letting the political parties throw us off balance. And it seems like it's going to come to a head where we start fighting each other about that. And I'm not going to front. In Jamaica, I think it's the People's National Party and the Jamaican Labour Party, if I'm not mistaken. Now, the actual politicians ain't fist fighting with each other. But they each got gangs fighting proxy wars for them around every election season. Got street gangs in the garrisons fighting wars on their behalf that they ain't fighting on their own behalf. Jamaica's got a lot of potential. Even just agriculturally, Jamaica's got so much potential. You can grow a coffee in Jamaica that you cannot grow anywhere else. Just like in Brazil, there's a distinct type of coffee you can grow in Brazil. Same thing in Jamaica. If you go up into the hills, there's a type of coffee that you can grow. You can't grow it anywhere else because the temperature between the day and the night fluctuates enough to where the beans expand and contract. And that gives it a taste that you can't replicate anywhere else. And Jamaica's not a coffee drinking culture. It's a coffee producing, coffee selling culture. You all have heard of Blue Mountain Coffee. And if you go shopping for coffee there, I mean, when I say there, I mean in the States where y'all are, not in Jamaica. If you go shopping for coffee in the States, you know that Blue Mountain Coffee is expensive. You know that. So if you're there in Jamaica, you could, if you've been there or if you know someone from there, they'll tell you the same thing that Africans say about many African countries. The potential is there. The resources are there. They should not have to import any food for which they're not exporting something that they've got, because most of the soil is fertile. Oh yeah, a lot of times tropical rainforest environments are not the most fertile, to be honest. They got biodiversity, but they're not known for high fertility in most cases. Jamaica actually has, while it's tropical, it also has a high fertility per per acre or per hectare of land in terms of the soil. But it can't develop because not only does Jamaica have to consistently pay money to the IMF and to the World Bank, but also there's a certain level of development that cannot happen because you got this leadership at the top. And you know what, Abdullah bin Bobby, you said the politicians in Jamaica are white. What I saw is that they were both black and white, but they might as well be white because the ones, at least from those two major parties, are willing to enlist gangs to fight proxy wars for them, to the point that Jamaica cannot develop. That's what's going on. That's what I've been seeing. So despite its potential, it's consistently held back, and politics does play a large role. Not just international politics, but domestic politics plays a large role in it too. If they don't hold each other back, yeah, of course, England and the World Bank and the IMF are going to step in and do what it takes to hold them back. That's how it got started. But right now, that might not even be necessary. They're already up to their chest in debt. And then to make matters worse, the two political parties are steady fighting each other on the streets, but not actually with the politicians fighting with each other. And one of the things we know that the white politicians are not going to engage in fist fights with each other. This has to do, again, with the balance. Because while we're sitting up here thinking that it's hard to be so balanced because we don't know enough to do it, we fail to realize that if we're not going to balance ourselves, they're going to balance us right where they want us. And where they want us is on they want us at opposite wings, scrapping with each other. That's what they want. They're controlling their own opposition, so to speak, just so that we're always taking each side of the opposition or each of the two sides seriously, so that we'll fight over the bones while they eat the meat. That's really what's happening. At the end of it all, if you ain't going to reach this point of balanced thinking, where people can't throw you off and get you into unnecessary conflicts, where you're not blaming people for things you're not sure that they have done, then they're going to have you wherever they want you. Now, I think I've said all that I need to say at this point about the balance and why I chose the moniker and what that has to do with the balance and how that has to really affect our worldview, just to be fair. I mean, hell, if I'm not going to walk around blaming white folks for stuff that I'm not sure they did, why would I do that to a black woman who's also one of their victims? No, I got enough. I mean, history has given us enough with which to nail American sisters already. And a lot more than what they could nail us for. That's real. However, I can't afford to be unbalanced enough to sit up here and blame them for something they didn't do, or even say that they weren't a victim of what they actually are a victim of. None of us can afford that. And if we can't reach that level of balanced thinking, then we're going to steady be fighting over bones with each other, with other groups of people that were also victims, and we're never going to get to the source of the problem. We need a power structure independent of white folks. That's what it comes down to. And it's going to be a lot easier for us to take other areas of the world that are politically independent on paper and make them independent in real life psychologically. And in fact, than it is for us to stay in the states where they are and actually have to abide by their rules and their laws. Some of us say, well, what about weapons ownership? That's another talk. But what I'm saying is that as an example, there are parts of the world where you can go and either you can own a weapon the same way others can for self-defense, or nobody can own one, at least not a firearm. What is it like in the States? Well, legally speaking, every citizen can own one. Legally speaking, every citizen that has not committed a felony and been convicted for it can own one, legally speaking. Sergeant Willie Pete already talked about this. What are they going to do about that? They want to have guns and they don't want you to have them. Well, what they'll do is they'll try to price you out of gun ownership first. They will try to harass you out of gun ownership first. And if it really comes down to it, then they'll just outright not sell it to you. They'll just tell the gun owners, gun store owners, put up a sign, we reserve the right to refuse service to anybody for any reason. And they'll turn around and refuse service to you. And then sell it to that white guy. Especially the one with the camouflage hat on and the goatee and the twang in his accent, the twang in his speech. Yeah, especially the one that's already got guns on the back of his pickup truck. That one there. That's what they're going to do. So you can sit up and say, yeah, well, you know, America's X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, I mean, you may have to live there at certain points and there are going to be advantages, but you cannot write off repatriation because in the States, they're always going to do something to hold you back and to hold other people of melanin or other people of color back, but a lot less than you, and then to not hold white folks back. And if they have to do it, if they're painted into a corner, then they'll just go ahead and make it a law again. You niggas can't own guns. If we catch you with a gun, we can shoot you on sight. That's what they will do if they have to. As unconstitutional as it is, they'll do it again. Back them into the corner, they'll do that. Build a Black Wall Street, and you don't have the means to annihilate anybody that approaches or surrounds it. And they're going to come in and annihilate the Black Wall Street again, wherever you build it. Freedom Nation, yes, I do recommend that we go there. But I've never said go there unarmed. And I've always said that that is a stepping stone to the real freedom, which is the repatriation. Because see, we might say, well, you know, we're going to be sitting ducks and easy to take advantage of when we go somewhere else. Do you know where the worst place to be a Lebanese is right now? Think about Lebanese people. The worst place to be a Lebanese person right now is in Lebanon. They are thriving when they get out of Lebanon. They're thriving in Liberia. During the Liberian Civil War, Lebanese people were not suffering. They owned the businesses and they had the generators when the power went out, and they were on top. Zaire, now the Congo, one of the two Congos. They're on top. They're the business community. In Mexico, they are the business community. The richest man in Mexico is Carlos Salim. He's a Lebanese Mexican. Selma Hayek is a Lebanese Mexican. Same thing in Colombia. Most of the Arabs in Colombia are business owners, and they're doing all right. Even in Brazil. In Argentina, actually, they're doing okay, but you know what? They're not necessarily on top because the Argentines are white. Now, that's where they have to compromise who they are in order to get ahead. Ask Carlos Menem, the former president of Argentina. He actually left Islam and converted to Catholicism, which in our religion is the major offense, so that he could become president. Because the Argentines, they're real white folks. They don't play that mess. You're not bringing your grape leaves and your tabula into the presidential palace. Oh, no, you're not doing that. And you better not be praying to that non-white God 5 times a day. That's what they do. They're not playing games. But now they're Lebanese in Europe as well, but they're not necessarily on top and calling all the shots, although they do have businesses. But in other non-white areas of the world, the Lebanese tend to do well. In the Gulf, they have to labor. They have to be labor. They can't own anything in the Gulf. Certainly no means of production. They cannot own real estate property. No foreigner can, to be honest with you. But the Lebanese don't have an advantage there. But outside of that, so we think that if we leave America, our lives are just going to be miserable. That's not really the case. Lebanon probably has a bigger diaspora than it does people living at home, maybe. So we can make it if we leave the States. And we need to stop thinking that we can't, that we stuck on America. We can't make it anywhere else. Or for those of us in the UK, we can't make it outside of the UK. And we don't need to limit ourselves either to Europe. That could be a stepping stone. That's a possibility. But we can't limit ourselves to areas where they call the shots and they're in control. So anyway, I'm going to ask Abdullah bin Bobby to tell me some more about Trump getting the Rona, because that might be a headline that just broke. I don't know. And it's late where you all are, so thanks for being patient with me. Well, I rambled on for 2.5 hours almost. But take the message that we really got to take a balanced approach to a lot of things. We're really going to have to start thinking in terms of balance, and that's going to involve a lot of reading of history or listening to people who teach history tell us, because our perspectives on a lot of things, it's not just that we got different opinions. We've reached a point where our perspectives and opinions are outright ill-informed and unbalanced, and they're about to be oppressive to people, where we're just going to all be flinging accusations at each other that ain't true. And that's a dangerous space to get in, because when we get to that point, while we arguing between the left and the right wing, that bird in the middle is going to be the one eating all the meat while we argue over the bones. I hope that what I've said will one day no longer be necessary. And in the meantime, I hope it helps. Black heart, black mind, black out. Assalamu alaikum to some of you. Peace out to the rest of you. And black heterosexual non-select male power, just because they don't like it.